The sun rose over the great Xuan nation, shining on the many rooftops of Xuanjing. In the Grand Tutor's manor, the building stood tall and quiet under the morning light. Inside the manor, the Grand Tutor sat on his seat with a calm face. A woman in a red dress stood beside him, holding a cup of wine. She smiled softly and asked him to drink. Another young woman knelt in front of him, holding a plate of grapes. She also looked up at him and gently asked him to drink. Both women waited for the Grand Tutor as they offered him wine with respectful smiles. A large hall was filled with rows of people kneeling on the red carpet. They bowed deeply toward the front and shouted together, wishing the Grand Tutor a happy birthday. The Grand Tutor stood before them, looking over the hall. He thought about his life and said that in the past 50 years he had risen from having nothing to becoming the Grand Tutor of the nation. Later he sat as someone poured wine for him. He lifted the cup proudly and thought that his power now overshadowed the whole world. He believed that the story of his life was so great that it could fill a multi-million-word novel. He remembered when he, Li Fan, first arrived in this world, he was only a poor scholar who struggled to survive. He carried his books on his back and walked through a small village filled with simple houses and quiet paths. Back in the present, the Grand Tutor lifted his cup with pride. He looked at his life and thought that a life like his was already perfect. Music filled the hall as dancers in elegant clothes moved gracefully. The Grand Tutor sat high on his throne while people around him enjoyed food, wine, and the lively celebration. He looked at everything before him and felt that there was nothing more one could ask for. But just when he was admiring his life, suddenly a man rushed inside the hall and called out to the Grand Tutor. He shouted that fire was falling from the sky, calling it a divine sign and an auspicious omen. Another person said that the glowing object seemed to be flying straight toward the Grand Tutor's manor. The Grand Tutor looked up with a serious expression while the women beside him watched the bright light in the distance with shock and confusion. The Grand Tutor stepped outside and stood on the balcony. Sparks of falling light drifted through the air. He looked up and whispered in shock, trying to understand what he was seeing. High in the sky, two powerful figures were clashing, one surrounded by golden light, the other wrapped in swirling purple energy. Just then, one of them shouted angrily at another man named Dao Xuanzi, telling him not to push him too far. As the two figures battled inside a huge whirlpool of light, the Grand Tutor's eyes widened. He finally recognized what they were. He pointed upward and stuttered, calling them cultivators. People inside the hall fell to their knees in panic and excitement. One person cried out that an immortal master had appeared. Another said it was a great omen. Everyone looked up at the sky, overwhelmed by fear and awe. The Grand Tutor stared upward with wide eyes. His expression changed from pride to disbelief. In his mind he wondered how something like this could happen. High in the sky, the man in white shouted angrily at the other cultivator. He asked Ko Hong if he really thought he could escape by fleeing to the land of immortal extinction. He demanded that Ko Hong hand over the cultivation method he obtained that day, saying their fight would only end when one of them died. Ko Hong, surrounded by golden flames, shouted back. He said it was ridiculous to ask for the method. He explained that he had been stuck at the foundation establishment stage for nearly 100 years because he lacked a core formation method. He clenched his fists and continued. His lifespan was almost over, and he was close to turning to dust. Now that he had finally obtained a core formation method, he said there was no way he would ever hand it over to someone else. The man in white spoke calmly but firmly. He said that the golden core Tao was a path walked alone. Even though many core formation methods existed, countless cultivators were still stuck at the foundation establishment stage. His expression hardened as he continued. With the path to longevity right in front of him, he said there was no way he would let Ko Hong escape. Ko Hong, wrapped in golden flames, let out a bitter laugh. He looked up at his opponent and said it was ridiculous. They had been brothers for 100 years, yet now they were fighting each other just for a small chance to survive. Ko Hong looked at his opponent and admitted that he was no match for him. He said it seemed he would not be able to escape his fate today. Golden flames swirled around him as he continued speaking. He pointed out that there were many mortals living in this place. Then he asked if his enemy could withstand such a dense concentration of the immortal mortal miasma that surrounded them. Dao Xuanzi raised his glowing sword, surrounded by purple energy. He called out Ko Hong's name loudly as power gathered around him. He pointed the blade forward with a sharp glare. As the energy surged, he demanded to know what Ko Hong was trying to do. The sword shone brighter, and purple light wrapped around it as he prepared to strike. Ko Hong stood inside the giant golden dragon formed from his flames. He looked down at his opponent and shouted that if Dao Xuanzi couldn't endure the power of the immortal mortal miasma, then he might still have a chance to survive. The golden dragon roared as it rushed forward, while purple energy spiraled around Dao Xuanzi, who held his glowing sword tightly. The two forces finally collided. A burst of golden flames and purple energy exploded in the sky as their attacks struck each other with full power. The impact sent a violent shockwave downward. In the next moment, a massive explosion hit the ground, tearing apart stone and earth. Fire and debris flew in all directions as the area below was completely destroyed by the clash. The people inside the building stared in shock as the explosion echoed outside. Their eyes widened and they froze where they stood, unable to believe what they were seeing. The Grand Tutor at the front clenched his teeth, his face twisted with anger as he shouted in frustration. A moment later, the blast wave reached him and everything shook violently. He was thrown back into the rubble as the ground collapsed around him. Dust and broken stones covered the area. The Grand Tutor groaned softly, struggling to rise while the ruins crumbled beneath him. Li Fan lay in the rubble, coughing heavily as dust rose around him. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to steady himself. As he looked down, his eyes widened in fear. He saw the bodies of his wife and children lying broken and covered in blood among the collapsed stones. His voice trembled as he coughed again, calling out for them in panic. Flames spread across the ruins, and smoke filled the air. The old man slowly stood up, still coughing, and looked over the destroyed courtyard. Bodies lay scattered everywhere, and the fire continued to burn through what was left of his home. The city of Xuanjing, once bright and full of life, was now drowned in flames. Fire spread in every direction, turning everything into a scene of blood and destruction. Wherever the eye looked, there were only broken bodies and collapsed buildings. The smoke rose high, and the air was filled with falling sparks. Li Fan stood in the middle of the ruins, staring at the burning remains of his home. After such a disaster, he knew almost no one had survived. Not even 1 out of 100 citizens was likely left alive. He sank to the ground, holding his injured body as the flames reflected in his eyes. He said that all of this, every part of this tragedy, was caused by the two cultivators who suddenly appeared. Li Fan lay on the ground, weak and covered in dust. His breath shook as he tried to speak, and a small sound escaped his lips. Then he suddenly began to laugh. His laughter echoed through the ruined streets as tears mixed with the dirt on his face. He clutched his head and kept laughing bitterly while staring at the broken sky above him. In despair, he asked how cultivators could exist in this world at all. From the moment he became an official, he used all the power he had to search for any sign of the immortal path. He sent ships across the seas and traveled to distant places. After he rose to the position of imperial tutor, standing above all others, he searched the entire world even more fiercely. His men crossed snowy mountains, deep forests and frozen lands. They went north to the frozen sea, south to the great ocean, east to the ruinous abyss, and west to the linked mountains. But no matter how far they went, they found nothing. In all of Great Xuan, not a single trace proved that immortals truly existed. Li Fan stared ahead with wide, trembling eyes. He said he had already given up long ago. He had grown old, and his hope for the immortal path had disappeared with time. But now, looking at the destruction around him, his mind shook. He wondered if those two people he saw earlier were actually immortals, and if they were, he questioned where such immortals could have come from. As the sky trembled, he felt as if fate was mocking him. Lightning wrapped around his body as he raised his hand and activated his power. Bright blue symbols flowed around him while he shouted the name of his treasure, Huan Zhen. A glowing sphere formed above him as light burst in all directions. Words echoed within the light, saying that when the true becomes false, the false becomes true. The energy continued to gather until it reached its peak. The sphere announced that charging was complete. It asked if it should virtualize the current scenario and return to the initial anchor point. Li Fan then explained what Huan Zhen truly was. He said it was the name he had given to his unique treasure. Its purpose was to turn truth into illusion and reality into virtuality. It could take everything he had experienced and convert it into a simulated world, letting him return to a chosen moment, specifically, the moment he first transmigrated into this world. In fact, this was already his second life since transmigrating into the Great Xuan Nation. In his first life, even though he had big dreams, he was just an ordinary man. He wanted to become the top scholar, but he failed the exams again and again. After turning 30, he finally gave up on becoming an official and opened a small business instead. His life slowly became peaceful. He worked hard, earned money, and eventually became a wealthy family head. He got married, had children, and lived an ordinary but happy life. Years passed, and he grew old. It was only when he was on his deathbed that his unique treasure, Huanzhen, awakened for the first time. That awakening became the reason for his unstoppable rise in his second life. After the Huanzhen system finished charging, it gave him the ability to restart his life and return to a chosen point to begin again. But he also said he couldn't restart yet. There were still important things he needed to finish in this life. A few days later, inside the tent, Li Fan sat at his desk, writing commands on a long scroll. His expression was calm but serious. A guard stood beside him waiting for orders. Li Fan told the guard to send out his command. He ordered the garrison camp outside the city to rush to Xuanjing and maintain order after the disaster. The guard bowed and answered respectfully. Most of Xuanjing's buildings had been destroyed. He planned that once his trusted garrison camp took control of the city, they could speed up the rebuilding after the disaster. More importantly, he could stay in the barracks, oversee the cleanup, and quietly send people to search for the two mysterious cultivators. 1 month later, the ruined city slowly began to show signs of life again. Streets that were once empty started filling with people. Several months later, Xuanjing finally began to recover a proper sense of normal life, as if the disaster had only been a distant memory. Just then, a hooded man knelt on the floor and gave his report to Li Fan. He said there was still no news about the two cultivators. Li Fan, now standing with his back turned, listened quietly. His expression remained calm, but he muttered that he shouldn't have gotten his hopes up about this. He looked up at the light above him. He thought that he had nothing left to hold on to in this life. He raised his hand and called out the name of his treasure, Huanzhen. Bright blue light burst out from his chest and wrapped around him. Glowing symbols fell from the air like rain. A voice asked if he wanted to virtualize the current situation and return to the initial breakpoint. He stood in the center of the glowing circle, surrounded by shimmering light, and gave his answer in a calm voice. As the bright blue light started feeding him, Li Fan's body became younger and younger. Countless memories floated around him in glowing panels as he slowly descended through the light. He looked at the scenes around him and softly spoke the names of the two cultivators, Dao Shanzi and Ko Hong. Then he raised his hand. His voice was calm as he said that in 50 years he would still be waiting for them in Xuanjing. He ordered Huanzhen to restart his life and return to the first year of the breakpoint. The glowing voice answered that it understood. His body dissolved into blue light and fell into a swirling vortex. As he disappeared into the spiral, he made a final vow. He said that riches and honor meant nothing to him. In the next life, he would hunt the immortals. After that, he returned to the first anchor year. He became so excited that he behaved strangely, and his aunt almost forced him to drink exorcism water from the village witch. Half a year later, he took the provincial exam. Even though his ranking was low and he placed somewhere in the 30s, he still became a jurin, bringing honor to his family. In Anchor Year 2, he took the metropolitan exam and passed. He performed very well in the palace exam, earning the second rank and receiving the title of Jinshi. He then used connections in Shanjing and managed to obtain the position of county magistrate of Wen County in Jiangnan. In Anchor Year 3, he started building his own trusted inner circle. He later succeeded in producing a batch of explosives and matchlock rifles. In Anchor Year 5, refugees gathered to rebel against Prince Langya's manor. He led troops to rescue them and saved Prince Langya's family. Prince Langya became very grateful to him. By Anchor Year 6, he was promoted to the prefect of Zhonghui Prefecture and married the daughter of the Vice Minister of Rights. In Anchor Year 7, his wife gave birth to a son. In Anchor Year 10, Princess Langya also gave birth to a son. He personally went to congratulate her and brought a carefully prepared gift. By Anchor Year 15, the emperor passed away. Prince Langya inherited the throne and changed the era name to Xuanjing. Emperor Xuanjing summoned him to the capital, promoted him to Vice Minister of War, and ordered him to lead troops to suppress rebellions. In Anchor Year 18, he defeated the rebel armies. Emperor Xuanjing then took back his military authority, promoted him to Minister of War, and appointed him as the Grand Tutor to the Crown Prince. In Anchor Year 20, the Empress was suddenly accused of being involved in witchcraft. Emperor Xuanjing became furious and sent her to the Cold Palace. The Crown Prince quietly asked for his help, and he agreed right away. After a private investigation, he discovered the person who had framed the Empress and cleared her name. But even after learning the truth, Emperor Xuanjing still refused to release the Empress from the Cold Palace. By Anchor Year 25, He received secret news that someone had reported him for secretly visiting the Empress in the Cold Palace. In the same year, Emperor Xuanjing was assassinated while traveling. After his death, officials brought the Empress out of the Cold Palace. The Crown Prince then took the throne, and the new era was named Kangning. By Anchor Year 26, the Grand Tutor was given even more power. He was also appointed as the Grand Scholar of the Deliberative Council, reaching the highest position in the court. He used this chance to remove his opponents and form his own faction. By Anchor Year 30, the people no longer spoke of the Emperor. Everyone only knew the name of the Grand Tutor. By Anchor Year 31, the Empress Dowager became pregnant and gave birth to a son. In Anchor Year 38, Emperor Kangning died from depression. By Anchor Year 40, the Empress Dowager also died from illness. In Anchor Year 45, his wife passed away. In Anchor Year 46, his eldest son died from illness. By Anchor Year 50, 2 immortals descended from the ruinous abyss and destroyed Xuanjing. He barely escaped with his life. After that, the simulation came to an end. 4 choices appeared before him. 1. Keep one item he had during the simulation. 2. Keep the cultivation level he reached in the simulation. 3. Keep the simulation memories of one person close to him, allowing that person to inherit the memory. Give up all choices to speed up the charging progress. Li Fan stood inside the glowing blue light, surrounded by falling lines of data. He wondered quietly if reality had turned into an illusion or if everything he saw was only a simulation that felt too real. He thought that maybe once a person reached a certain level, the difference between truth and illusion no longer mattered. He sighed and said that it was better to check the 4 options first. A glowing screen appeared in front of him, showing the choices he could keep from the simulation. He read through them carefully. The first option let him keep an item he had during the simulation. The second option let him keep the cultivation level he reached inside that life. He thought about it seriously. The first and second choices were easy to understand. If he ever started cultivating in the future, both options would be very useful. But sadly, in that simulated life, he had been just an ordinary mortal, so neither option would help him now. He looked at the screen again and read the third and fourth options. The third option mentioned giving the simulation memories of someone close to him to that person. He frowned and thought that no one could know what kind of problems that might cause. He then said that stability was the most important thing, so only the fourth option made sense. He continued reading calmly. His ability, Huan Zhen, needed to charge up. Whenever he faced a fatal attack, Huan Zhen would use that stored charge to protect him automatically. Because of this ability, he had survived many deadly situations in his past life. So he decided that the fourth option was the safest and most stable choice. With that thought, he chose to speed up the charging progress. A glowing screen appeared again, showing his current details. His name was listed as Li Fan. His realm was still mortal. His physical age was 20, but his total lifespan reached 86. His mental age was already 166 out of a maximum of 1056. The virtualization charge progress showed 30%. He looked at the information and thought quietly. Across 3 lives, he had already lived for 166 years in total. He remembered that in his last life, his mental age limit had just passed 900 years, but now it had grown to more than 1,000. He thought about the limits of his mind. When someone carries too many memories, their mental endurance eventually reaches a breaking point. If the burden becomes too heavy, the soul collapses. This was known as the erosion of time. But he also knew that as a person's mental strength grew, their mental age limit would rise as well. Li Fan looked forward with calm determination. As long as he stepped onto the path of cultivation, none of these problems would trouble him anymore. He set his goal clearly. In this life, he wanted to learn the secrets of cultivation from the 2 powerful cultivators he had seen before. He also remembered something important. In 50 years those 2 would descend upon Xuanjing again. If he prepared early and made up for the weaknesses he had once suffered, he might actually have a chance to win against them. So Li Fan thought for a moment and remembered something the cultivators had mentioned. Maybe besides using guns and explosives, he could rely on that strange immortal miasma they talked about. But he also knew he could not just sit and wait for 50 years. Suddenly, he remembered those 2 cultivators came from the ruinous abyss in the east. If he wanted to prepare early, he could send people down to the bottom of the abyss to investigate first. He thought about his past life and felt a cold truth. The scariest thing in life was having no goal. Back then, he would often wake up beside the Empress Dowager in the middle of the night, feeling nothing but emptiness and confusion. He had already reached the highest point a mortal could reach. There was no more room to rise, and even if he reincarnated again, it would end the same way. Power, pleasure, and luxury had repeated so many times that they no longer meant anything. Everything felt dull, like chewing tasteless wax. Li Fan realized that if things continued like that, then someday after another reincarnation, he might have chosen to end his own life out of boredom and despair. However, he remembered the moment those two cultivators appeared. Their arrival opened a completely new possibility in his life. When he looked at the swirling lights of their battle, it felt as if a strange and tempting new world was calling out to him. He clenched his hand, filled with determination. He wanted to cultivate, he wanted a long life, and he believed nothing could stop him anymore. With a confident smile, he spoke to the air as if declaring a challenge. He said he would meet Dao Xuanzi and Ko Hong again in 50 years. With the experience of 2 lifetimes, everything moved smoothly for him, like water flowing toward its destination. He still took part in the imperial exams. This time, with decades of experience and power, the essays he wrote were far better than in his past life. He placed first in the provincial exam, the metropolitan exam, and the palace exam, earning the title of triple first and shaking the world with his reputation. Afterward, he chose to serve as an official in Wen County. Even though the imperial court was confused and regretful about his request, they still approved it. Because of his great fame and his clear understanding of every official's temperament, he easily brought Wen County under control. Then he began promoting and nurturing the trusted subordinates he remembered from his previous life. In the 4th year, he searched in secret until he found someone who could act as Prince Langya's body double. He trained that person and made him a trusted subordinate. In the 5th year, Li Fan ordered another subordinate to disguise himself as a refugee and attack Prince Langya's manor. He pretended to step in and rescue the prince, but the truth was different. He secretly worked from the inside to kill Prince Langya's entire family, and at the same time he arranged for the body double to take the prince's place. From that point on, he secretly took control of Prince Langya's manor. In the 9th year, the wedding between Prince Langya and the chief grand scholar's granddaughter went ahead as planned. That night, he entered the bridal chamber himself and spent the night with Princess Langya. In the 10th year, Princess Langya gave birth to a son, who was actually his child. By the 15th year, the emperor had become seriously ill. After receiving the Edict of Succession, he hurried to the capital with his trusted subordinates. After Prince Langya took the throne, he quickly placed his own people throughout the imperial court. With the chief grand scholar secretly assisting him, he easily gained full control of the situation. In the 20th year, after helping his son become emperor, he granted himself the title of Grand Tutor. He stepped out from behind the scenes and once again stood at the front, holding power over the world. After that, the progress of Great Xuan did not slow down. Instead, everything advanced even faster under his guidance and will. In the 35th year at the Grand Tutor's manor, he asked about the ruinous abyss. He wondered if the fog really disappeared for half a day every 15 years. A hooded subordinate reported to him. He confirmed it was true. The Immortal seeking camp had been ordered to stay near the abyss and observe it day and night. A few days ago they finally made a breakthrough. After the thick fog cleared, a faint light appeared from the bottom of the abyss. They used a telescope to look closely and discovered an upside-down landscape hidden below. Everyone saw something slightly different, but they all described a vast land filled with countless mountains rising and falling. Hidden among them were grand buildings that could barely be seen through the mist. They also saw huge cities spread across the plains, full of life with more than 1 million people living there. Some even saw a city floating in the sky, glowing with rosy light. Rare and strange beasts flew all around it. To them it looked truly incredible. Li Fan looked serious as he spoke. He said that the strange things they had seen really did come from the ruinous abyss. He then asked the hooded man if they had found a way to reach the bottom of that abyss. The hooded subordinate lowered his head and admitted his failure. He said they had tried many methods, but whenever they went deep enough, a sudden astral wind tore them apart. He explained that the astral wind was terrifying. Even their strongest armor could not withstand it for even a moment. Li Fan stood by the railing, looking out into the night. His cloak blew softly in the wind as he raised his head toward the sky. The full moon shone brightly above him, surrounded by dark clouds. He stared at it in silence for a moment. Then he spoke calmly, saying that it seemed he would just have to wait for the two of them. In the 50th year the moon shone brightly over Xuanjing. the capital of the great Xuan nation. The city was peaceful, its rooftops stretching out under the night sky. Then suddenly, two powerful lights clashed in the sky, one blazing like fire and the other glowing with a blue-purple aura. A furious man covered in flames charged forward. He yelled loudly at the calm man facing him, shouting that Dao Xuanzi should not push him too far. As the two men fought in the sky, a rain of fiery attacks suddenly shot toward them from above. Both of them were caught off guard and quickly dodged. Ku Hong, covered in flames, spun around in anger. He raised his arms, forming swirling energy shields around his body to block the falling fire. With a furious expression, he shouted loudly, demanding to know who dared to launch a sneak attack on him. Soldiers on the ground lifted their guns and fired into the sky. Bright streams of light shot upward toward the two men fighting above. Ku Hong, surrounded by flames, caught the flying bullets with his swirling energy. He stared at the small metal pieces and wondered what they were. Then, with a wave of his hand, he sent a fiery force outward. One of the soldiers' guns suddenly burst into flames and flew out of his hands, making everyone below panic. Ku Hong held the burning weapon in his hand. He looked at it with interest. He said that the mortals here had created something unusual, using complex mechanical designs instead of formations, and using explosive mortal power instead of spiritual energy. He found it surprising that after thousands of years the mortals who were exiled to this land could invent such an object. But he also said it was a pity. The weapon only worked in this place where the great Tao was incomplete. Then he added that outside the land of immortal extinction, this weapon was nothing more than useless scrap metal. He looked down coldly and said that mere mortals dared to attack cultivators like him. He said he felt a little guilty at first, but now it seemed they were simply looking for their own death. His expression turned serious. He raised his head, took a deep breath, and prepared his next move. Then he shouted the name of his technique, the Tao art called Fire Dragon's Roar. A huge wave of golden light burst out from the man's body. The glowing energy twisted and formed the shape of a massive dragon made of fire. The dragon opened its mouth and roared as it rushed downward. The flaming dragon shot through the buildings below, tearing everything apart. Walls shattered, flames spread everywhere, and the entire area shook under the force of the attack. The entire area burned in a massive sea of flames. Buildings collapsed into ashes, and fire spread across the ruins like a raging wave. But suddenly, Ku Hong stared wide-eyed in shock, unable to understand what he was seeing. He trembled as he realized something was wrong. He thought to himself that his fire dragon's roar was a deadly technique no mortal could possibly survive. Yet when he looked down through the smoke and flames, many soldiers were still standing. They pushed aside debris and rose to their feet, illuminated by the burning city behind them. His expression twisted in disbelief. He wondered why so many people were still alive. Just then, Dao Shenzi answered him. He said the hidden weapons used against them had been soaked in mortal blood. Because of that, once they were touched by the immortal mortal miasma, their Tao arts became weaker. He looked at the blood-stained bullets floating around his hand. He said they had been ambushed the moment they arrived, and the enemy had even used the immortal mortal miasma. It showed the enemy had come fully prepared. He then looked around at the strange place below them and said it was too bizarre and they shouldn't stay here for long. After finding this, both of them rose higher into the sky. Dao Shenzi told Ku Hong to move, and they both prepared to leave. However, before they could leave, a loud voice echoed from above, calling out to Dao Shenzi and Ku Hong. The voice warned them that if they escaped now, the news of them obtaining a core formation method would spread across the entire cultivation world by tomorrow. Upon hearing this, both of them flew forward in shock. Dao Shenzi looked confused and angry, thinking that only the two of them knew about getting the core formation method, so it shouldn't have been possible for the news to leak. Ku Hong also looked tense. He asked who could have revealed it. As they were thinking, a sudden attack shot toward them from below. Ku Hong glared at the attack and yelled angrily, flames bursting around him as he shouted that someone was seeking death. He raised his arm ready to counter, but Dao Xuanzi's expression changed sharply. He shouted that something was wrong and told Ku Hong to dodge quickly. But before they could react, more red streaks continued to rise, closing in on them fast and exploding around them in mid-air, creating massive blasts of red smoke and light. The force pushed them back as the explosions filled the sky. Below, the ruined city burned, while a heavy rain of red droplets fell from above, covering the ground. When the smoke cleared, a group of armored soldiers stood in a circle on the blood-stained floor. At the center of the circle lay both Ku Hong and Dao Xuanzi, surrounded by soldiers. One of the soldiers pointed his weapon forward and announced that their grand tutor had given an order. He said that if the two cultivators surrendered, their lives would be spared. Dou Shenzi knelt on the ground, covered in blood. He let out a faint laugh and looked at a glowing ring on his hand. Flames wrapped around the ring as he stared at it with trembling eyes. Ko Hong, lying weakly on the ground, leaned toward him. He told him to take his storage ring. With his last breath, he told him to go. Above the burning ruins, a giant golden dragon formed in the sky, its entire body glowing like fire. The dragon twisted and roared as flames swirled around it. The fiery dragon slowly changed shape, turning into a swirling trail of golden light. The light wrapped itself around a wooden branch that floated upward, surrounded by glowing leaves. Bright light filled the sky, and words appeared beside the branch. The text described Ko Hong, who had trained for 205 years. It said he formed his Tao foundation using the mystical object called the Dragon Branch. But in the land of immortal extinction, thousands of mortals surrounded him, and he was injured by the immortal mortal miasma. The words explained that he lost all his cultivation, and his life was now close to ending. Now his body had died, and his Tao had vanished, returning to the heavens. His blood-stained body stood tall for a moment, as if held up by the last trace of will, before falling lifeless. Not far away, Dao Xuanzi knelt on the ground, covered in wounds. Behind him, flames burned through the ruins while soldiers aimed their weapons at him. One soldier spoke respectfully, saying their grand tutor had no intention of fighting him to the death. The soldier added that if Dao Xuanzi stopped resisting, the grand tutor promised to spare his life. Far away, Li Fan stood on a rocky cliff, watching the burning battlefield below. Flames surrounded the area where Dao Xuanzi was cornered. Li Fan looked toward the sky and thought to himself that when Ko Hong died moments ago, he seemed to hear a strange voice from above. Li Fan then lowered his gaze. He thought that the meaning of the voice no longer mattered because hunting immortals in this lifetime was already hopeless. He let out a cold breath and admitted that he never expected the immortal mortal miasma to be so deadly to cultivators. Meanwhile, Dao Xuanzi stood in front of the burning ruins with soldiers aiming their weapons at him. He said he did not know who the enemy leader was or what their purpose might be. He explained that he and his brother had been plotted against, leading to his brother's death and the loss of their Tao, and there was nothing more to say. His eyes turned sharp with anger. He said he could not accept what had happened. He looked at the soldiers and said that hiding behind mortals and using the immortal mortal miasma was something despised by all cultivators. He then said that his brother, Ko Hong, had died at the hands of someone like them, and he felt it was not worth it for his brother. Dao Xuanzi lifted himself into the air. He said that everyone had already seen his brother's foundation establishment mystical object. Then he rose higher, floating above the soldiers, and told them to look at his own. His body shone with a faint blue glow as he stood in the sky. He raised one hand toward the heavens and declared that with the wonders of heaven and earth he would build his Tao foundation. Just then, a giant, stone-like blade hung high in the sky as the clouds swirled around it. Dao Shenzi floated below and said that his Tao foundation was named Dao Shen. He continued speaking from above, saying he had a sword and invited everyone to look at it. In the next moment, a burst of bright purple and white light exploded outward. A massive force shot toward the ground like a falling sword, cutting through everything in its path as the sky lit up with blinding energy. Seeing this, Li Fan quickly activated his artifact, Huan Zhen, and the scene faded into darkness. Just then, a message appeared in front of him saying that the simulation had ended. Li Fan opened his eyes inside the glowing formation. Blue light wrapped around him as he struggled to catch his breath. He wondered if this was what a peak foundation establishment cultivator was like. He thought that without the immortal mortal miasma, even if he reincarnated 100 times and used countless tricks, it still wouldn't be enough to threaten someone of that level. A memory of Ko Hong's body appeared before him. He stared at it and admitted he didn't expect the immortal mortal miasma to directly destroy Ko Hong's body and erase his Tao. He then thought about how Ko Hong and Dao Shenzi had called each other brother of 100 years. At first he believed it was only a figure of speech, but now he realized their bond had been far deeper than he imagined. He also remembered the moment they were attacked. Dao Shenzi shouted a warning to Ko Hong. Ko Hong realized he couldn't escape death, so he willingly passed his core formation method to Dao Shenzi. Dao Shenzi watched Ko Hong get ambushed and die. He couldn't accept it, and instead of saving himself, he used a self-destructive sword technique. Li Fan understood from this that their friendship had been far deeper than normal. He remembered Dao Shenzi explained that the path of forming a golden core was something one had to walk alone. Even though many methods existed in the world, far more cultivators were stuck at the foundation establishment stage. Li Fan lowered his head and thought deeply. The golden core Dao was a path one had to walk alone, and immortal methods could not be cultivated together. He wondered that if even men as close as brothers ended up this way, then what the cultivation world outside must truly be like. He then straightened up, determination filling his eyes. He said to himself that no matter how dangerous the path ahead was, he would not waver. With Huan Zhen's help, and as long as he was careful, no challenge should be able to stop him. He remembered how last time he had attacked both of them at once. This time, he thought he might try winning one of them over instead. Just then, a glowing blue panel appeared before him, showing details about his life. He read that his mental age limit had only increased by a few dozen years this time, meaning he was getting close to the maximum. Counting the life he lived before transmigrating, this was already his 5th life. He sighed, realizing again how difficult the path to immortality truly was. He looked at the panel showing his name, Li Fan, and the numbers rising slowly. Then he quietly hoped that the 50 years he gained this time would not be wasted. In the 35th year of his anchor timeline, Li Fan arrived at the endless ruinous abyss. A huge pit filled with thick white fog stretched before him. From his last simulation he had learned that the fog covering the abyss cleared once every 15 years. He stood at the edge of the rocky cliff, saying he had come this time to witness it with his own eyes. After some time passed, the ground trembled. A giant pillar of white fog suddenly burst out from the abyss. It shot upward with incredible force, rising into the sky like a reverse waterfall. The great wind from the abyss kept blowing for a long time. It lasted for about a quarter of an hour before the heavy fog finally cleared completely. When the fog was gone, Li Fan took out a telescope and leaned forward to look down into the deep ruinous abyss. He remembered the information he had heard before. People said that anyone who looked into the bottom of the abyss would see a different scene. Through the telescope he stared into the darkness. Slowly, the bottom of the abyss came into view. What he saw was shocking. A ruined land filled with collapsed buildings and broken structures. In the center, glowing red words were written on the stone wall. The immortal Tao is dead. His face turned pale as he lowered the telescope. He wondered what could have happened here. He thought to himself that if the immortal Tao was truly dead, then something terrible must have happened to the entire cultivation world. In the 15th anchor year, in Xuanjing City, the same scene repeated again. Both Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi appeared again in Xuanjing City. Ko Hong glared upward and shouted angrily that Dao Xuanzi had gone too far. Dao Xuanzi rushed toward him with a powerful punch, the wind whipping around them as they clashed above the rooftops. As they fought, a group of soldiers rose into the air below them. They shouted that they had been ordered by Immortal Master Dao Xuanzi to wait for Ko Hong, calling him a brat as they prepared to attack. Ko Hong quickly surrounded his body with golden light to protect himself. As attacks rained down on him, he wondered how this was possible. He questioned if Dao Xuanzi had somehow known he would escape to this place. Golden energy wrapped around his body, and he shouted in disbelief as he recognized the technique being used against him, the immortal mortal miasma. He glared upward and called Dao Xuanzi despicable, while the golden attacks struck faster and harder. Dao Xuanzi watched in confusion. He couldn't understand why these mortals were attacking Ko Hong while claiming to follow him. What shocked him even more was that the mortals could use the immortal mortal miasma, a skill they should not have. He looked around with a troubled expression and admitted that something was very wrong with this place. He told Ko Hong that these mortals were not under his command at all. Meanwhile, below, Li Fan asked how Immortal Master Dao Xuanzi could betray their agreement after everything they had done. He reminded Dao Xuanzi that they had agreed to help him kill Ko Hong and steal his core formation method. In return, Dao Xuanzi was supposed to lead his clan out of this forsaken land. Now he felt completely abandoned. Upon hearing this, Ko Hong furiously yelled again, insisting that no one else in the world knew about the core formation method except the two of them. He accused Dao Xuanzi directly, saying it had to be him. His face twisted in rage as he demanded the truth. Dao Xuanzi looked surprised as he realized that the other person actually knew about the core formation method. The voice told him that their clan had angered countless people just to obtain the immortal mortal miasma he had spoken of. He explained that public hatred was now rising, and if the immortal master failed to keep his promise and lead them out, his entire clan might soon die with no place to be buried. Before he could finish, a loud voice cut through the air. Dao Xuanzi had found the direction the voice was coming from. Purple energy swirled around him as he rushed forward in fury. Dao Xuanzi called him a shameless villain and ordered him to shut his mouth, then attacked in the direction where the voice was coming from. Dao Xuanzi stood inside the swirling storm of spiritual energy. A powerful force pushed everything around him apart as a strange box-shaped object appeared in the air. The voice was coming from this strange artifact. It asked if the immortal master was trying to silence them by killing them right now. Dao Xuanzi's anger deepened as he stared at the box. He questioned what kind of Dharma artifact it was, noting that the enemy was far more cautious than expected. A moment later, purple energy burst out. Dao Xuanzi swung his arm and unleashed a powerful attack. The purple force crashed down on the floating box-like artifact, smashing it apart into pieces. Ku Hong, covered in flames, floated in the air and glared at Dao Xuanzi. He shouted that they had known each other for 100 years, yet he never thought he had misjudged him so badly. He accused Dao Xuanzi of wanting the core formation method and using many underhanded tricks to get it. Below him, Dao Xuanzi looked up in silence, his face shadowed in anger. Ku Hong then rushed forward. He shouted that he would not run anymore, and challenged Dao Xuanzi to come and take the method if he had the skill. He formed a hand sign and unleashed his technique. A giant flaming dragon appeared behind him and roared forward, spewing a massive wave of fire toward Dao Xuanzi. The ground shook as the flaming dragon's attack rushed forward. Dao Xuanzi let out a calm breath, his expression steady and cold. He slowly raised his hand, forming a sword gesture. A burst of purple light gathered around him, swirling like a storm. In the next moment, a glowing purple sword appeared in his hand. Dao Xuanzi swung the sword with one clean motion. The purple energy shot out like a beam, cutting through the air. The sword energy collided directly with the giant wave of flames. A blinding light exploded between the two attacks as purple and orange crashed together with overwhelming force. The flaming dragon and the purple sword light continued to clash in the sky, shaking everything around them. Watching the fight, Li Fan, hiding nearby, grew nervous. He said that Dao Xuanzi was cruel and unpredictable, and if Dao Xuanzi won, none of them would be able to escape. He quickly shouted to his sons, ordering them to help Immortal Master Ku Hong fight Dao Xuanzi. Golden light burst out as Ku Hong gathered more power. Smiling coldly, he said that those who commit many injustices always bring destruction upon themselves. He mocked Dao Xuanzi, saying he never expected a man who acted noble to break his promises and face backlash. Dao Xuanzi's face twisted with rage. He jumped forward and shouted loudly, calling Ku Hong a fool. Ku Hong laughed loudly. He mocked Dao Xuanzi, saying that if Dao Xuanzi was truly so clever, he wouldn't have been abandoned by everyone. He said this was what it meant to fall because of one's own tricks. He then raised his glowing hand and said he had just mastered a new Dao technique, and it was the perfect time to use it. Flames wrapped around his arm as he pointed forward. He shouted the name of his move, calling it Imprisoning Dragon. A huge fiery cage instantly formed around Dao Xuanzi, trapping him inside as burning lines dropped down like chains. Dao Xuanzi's eyes glowed purple with anger. He clenched his fingers into a sword gesture and shouted for the cage to break. Purple energy burst out around him. With a powerful strike, Dao Xuanzi shot straight upward with a massive purple sword light. The attack broke through the fiery cage and exploded on the ground, sending flames and shockwaves everywhere. Then Dao Xuanzi raised his hand and shouted Ku Hong's name with anger. His clothes and long hair blew in the strong wind as he pointed forward. Above the city, a giant golden blade of energy shot downward from the sky. It aimed straight toward the ground, tearing through the clouds as it fell. Ku Hong looked up at it and laughed boldly. He said he wanted to see whether Dao Xuan's power was stronger, or if his own Chu Dragon Staff was superior. Flames covered his arms as he used his technique. He shouted the name of his move, calling it Dragon Transformation. A huge golden dragon-shaped energy appeared behind him. The dragon rose into the sky, lifting his staff as it faced the falling golden blade head-on. But just then, Li Fan's soldiers attacked Dao Xuanzi with fire arrows, shouting that they would help Immortal Master Ku Hong. As the arrows covered in Immortal miasma exploded, a huge red blast erupted in the air. In the center of the blast, Dao Xuanzi screamed in pain as the shockwave tore through him. When the smoke cleared, he looked down at his chest in fear. A wooden branch had pierced straight through his body. Green leaves grew from it as the branch spread wider and wider. He trembled and shouted that this was bad, saying his Chu Dragon branch was turning against him. The branches kept growing, wrapping around his chest and body as he struggled helplessly. And in the next moment, the branches burst violently from Dao Xuanzi's body, spreading in all directions as blood splashed through the air. His entire form was torn apart by the growing roots. A golden light appeared along with a calm narration. It explained that Dao Xuanzi was a Foundation establishment cultivator who had trained for 100 years. He created his Dao Foundation with the help of his treasured sword Dao Xuan. In the immortal Forsaken Land he fought another cultivator. In the end he was killed by Ko Hong, who was also at the Foundation establishment stage. The scene returned to the battlefield, where the treasured sword floated alone in the sky as the pieces of Dao Xuanzi's body fell away. The voice ended by saying that Dao Xuanzi's body had perished, and his Dao had disappeared, returning to the heavens. Meanwhile, Li Fan, holding a staff, looked up at it. He frowned and said that the same strange voice had appeared earlier when Ko Hong died. Ko Hong beside him also looked up, breathing heavily. He repeated the name Dou Xianzi, with a troubled expression. Li Fan then stepped forward and introduced himself. He said he was Li Fan and greeted the Immortal Master with respect. He begged the Immortal Master to show mercy and save the 1,000 souls of his clan. Ku Hong stared down at him. He said that Li Fan was the one whose voice had echoed from all directions earlier. He looked annoyed and said that a mere mortal like Li Fan dared to interfere in a battle between cultivators. Li Fan held his wooden staff tightly and looked serious. He said he had only been searching for a slim chance to survive. He explained again that if the Immortal Master had lost, all of his clansmen would have surely died. Ko Hong looked at him and repeated his words. He said that in a harsh world, everyone struggles for even a tiny chance to live. He then mentioned that Dao Xuanzi, the Immortal Master, had once promised him something. Ku Hong told Li Fan that for 100 years Dao Xuanzi always looked like a man who kept his word. But in truth, Dao Xuanzi acted without principles and even lied to mortals. He then explained that the great immortal severing formation was extremely dangerous. He said that even cultivators struggled to escape from it, and if it already took so much effort for them, it would be impossible to bring mortals out safely. Li Fan's eyes widened in shock. He asked if the cultivator also didn't know any way to leave this place. Sweat ran down his face as he waited for an answer. Ko Hong crossed his arms and firmly said that was correct. Li Fan fell silent for a moment. Then he said this was not a good place to talk, and asked the Immortal Master to follow him. They moved into an underground shelter and sat at a small table. Li Fan faced the cultivator and asked again with a serious expression. He wanted to confirm whether what the Immortal Master said earlier about being unable to take mortals out of this immortal Forsaken Land was truly the truth. The cultivator looked at Li Fan and spoke firmly. He said that Li Fan was just a mortal, so there was no reason for him to lie. He explained that maybe a golden core cultivator could protect mortals while breaking through the great immortal severing formation, but for someone at the Foundation establishment stage it was completely impossible. Li Fan's face grew tense. He asked if that meant there was no hope for mortals to ever leave this world. The cultivator raised his voice and explained again. To leave the immortal Forsaken Land, one had to pass through the immortal severing formation. With the weak body of a mortal, it was absolutely impossible to cross it. He looked at Li Fan and continued speaking bluntly. He said Li Fan was already so old that he had one foot in the grave, so why was he still so desperate to leave? Then he mocked him, asking why he could not just enjoy being a local emperor in this place. Li Fan sat at the table and asked a serious question. He wondered if his descendants in the future could cultivate to the Foundation establishment realm like the Immortal Master. If they could reach that level, he asked if it would be possible for them to leave this land. The cultivator laughed loudly as soon as he heard this. He said there wasn't even a trace of spiritual energy in this place, so cultivation was impossible. He explained that mortals here were covered in miasma, and immortals and mortals were forever separated. In such conditions, how could anyone cultivate the path of immortality? The cultivator then leaned back and spoke more clearly. He advised Li Fan to give up on this idea. He said that if mortals wanted to cultivate, they first had to go to the outside world to rebuild their bodies and remove the miasma from them. Without doing that, even if the great Tao to immortality was placed right in front of them, they would only be able to look at it but never touch it. Li Fan trembled with shock. He said that immortals and mortals were eternally separated, then asked again if the cultivator truly meant there was no way for mortals to leave this place. The cultivator answered calmly that there really was no way. Hearing this, Li Fan lowered his head. He said that if the immortal master had no more instructions he would take his leave. With slow steps he turned around and began walking out of the underground shelter. The cultivator watched him go, surprised as Li Fan disappeared through a crack in the stone wall. Then the gate of the shelter started closing. Red mist suddenly filled the tunnel, and the cultivator breathed it in by accident. His eyes widened as he staggered back and shouted in shock. He realized it was the immortal mortal miasma and tried to speak, but his voice cracked as the poison spread through his body. Li Fan walked forward calmly while the cultivator screamed in pain. The red light spilled from the cracks in the stone as the cultivator fell to the ground, his body twisting under the miasma's effect. Li Fan stepped out of the shadows. His expression was cold as he looked down at the suffering cultivator. He said that since immortals and mortals could never coexist, a mortal like him could never fully trust the cultivator's words. According to Ku Hong, this land was called an immortal forsaken place. Everything began thousands of years ago, when a great change occurred in the ancient cultivation world. At first, cultivators didn't care about the strange plague spreading among mortals. No one paid attention to it. But later, the first cultivator was infected. After that, the plague became stronger and started spreading among cultivators as well. The plague used spiritual energy as its carrier. Because cultivators relied on spiritual energy to survive, the sickness quickly spread through the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, reaching every corner of the cultivation world. For cultivators who caught this plague, the outcome was terrible. In mild cases, their cultivation base weakened and their realm dropped. In severe cases, they lost all their cultivation overnight and became no different from mortals. Soon after, their bodies would die and their Tao would disappear, returning to the heavens. When the plague kept spreading, the cultivators grew desperate. They blamed the mortals for bringing the sickness into the world, and in their anger they turned on them. A large massacre began, and mortals ran in fear as cultivators attacked without mercy. But the slaughter did not last long. It was stopped by force. Even after many mortals died, the plague did not disappear. Instead, it spread even faster. The sickness followed the spiritual energy that filled the heavens and earth, slipping out of control. Because of this, more and more cultivators became infected. Many fell one after another, their bodies collapsing as the plague consumed them. The cultivators refused to sit and wait for death. Some of them began researching ways to resist the plague and find a cure. At the same time, another group proposed a drastic solution known as the Great Migration Plan. Under this plan, all mortals would be banished from the cultivation world. They would be sent to nearby lesser worlds and broken grotto heavens where no spiritual energy existed. After sending them away, the cultivators planned to use spell formations to seal those places forever. This way, the mortals would never be able to return. After the Great Migration, there were no mortals left in the cultivation world. But not every child born to cultivators had the talent to cultivate. Because of this, new mortals slowly appeared again over time. Inside the bodies of these mortals, a faint trace of the plague still remained. Since the plague was extremely harmful to immortal cultivation, the descendants of mortals who wished to cultivate had to remove this plague from their bodies before they could begin training. As years passed, the plague became closely tied to the difference between mortals and immortals. People began calling it the immortal mortal miasma. Li Fan read the old record in his hands. It said that long ago, to stop cultivators from the immortal sects from becoming corrupt, the ancestors banished the original mortals to distant places. Over time, these places became known among mortals as the immortal forsaken lands. As he lowered the paper, scenes of the past flashed around him, cultivators dying and fighting in those dangerous lands. He then said that no one truly knew how many immortal forsaken lands existed. Even fewer cultivators were willing to take the huge risk of entering such places. Meeting two people who came from there was already a rare stroke of luck. Li Fan stood deep in thought as scenes from his past flashed across the shattered space around him. He recalled the struggles he had witnessed and the cultivators he had met. He reminded himself that, as a mortal, his lifespan was limited. Even if he could simulate countless lifetimes in his mind, everything still had to happen within the short years he had left. He looked down at his own hands and acknowledged that he had already reached 70 years of age. His body's natural limit was 86. That meant only 16 years remained. Within those 16 years he understood that the chance of ever encountering another cultivator again was almost non-existent. Li Fan walked through the grand hall with a troubled expression. He wondered if he was truly destined to live as a mortal again and again, repeating the same limited life for countless lifetimes. He thought about the 300 long years he had waited, filled with hope and bitterness. After all that time, he could not accept such an ending. He questioned if there was truly no other path. The thought struck him suddenly, and his eyes widened in shock. He whispered to himself in disbelief, refusing to accept his fate. Lai Fan stood tall, leaning on his staff as he looked down at Ko Hong on the ground. He asked how the mortals from the Great Migration had ended up in the immortal Forsaken Land. Ko Hong lifted his head with a strained smile. His body was covered in wounds and heavy chains pinned him to the ground. He mocked Lai Fan, asking if he still hadn't given up. Then he spoke again with a cold tone. He said that even if Lai Fan somehow escaped, what difference would it make? At 70 years old, he questioned whether Lai Fan still planned to chase after immortal cultivation. Lai Fan leaned forward, staring at the chained warrior with sharp eyes. He asked him calmly if, now that his cultivation base was completely destroyed, he could even resume cultivating if he returned to the cultivation world. Ko Hong was shocked. His eyes widened as he let out a stunned gasp. Lai Fan then looked down at him with a firm expression. He said that if the man could help him find a way back to the cultivation world, he might take him along when the moment arrived. Ko Hong suddenly burst out in anger. His face twisted with rage and he shouted at Li Fan, calling him a treacherous villain and accusing him of trying to trick him again. However, Li Fan did not react to the outburst. Instead, he spoke calmly. He said that whether his words were true or false, they still held a small glimmer of hope. He then asked Ko Hong if he was really willing to give up this chance, if he was ready to stay in this tiny place, grow old and die here without fighting for survival. Hearing this, Ko Hong fell silent, unable to give an immediate answer. He lowered his head and spoke in a calmer voice. He said that, if he remembered correctly, the mortals back then were moved using Dharma artifacts, things like flying arcs or flying shuttles. His words shifted to a memory of the past. He explained that in ancient times the cultivation world was full of people, and many powerful sects ruled the land. Everything was prosperous, and the transportation-type Dharma artifacts were very common. He then said it was a pity that a great disaster later struck heaven and earth. After that, cultivators feared for their own lives and stopped working together. The flying arcs and shuttles slowly disappeared and were rarely seen again. Li Fan listened carefully and then asked if the great disaster the man mentioned was the strange plague that once spread across heaven and earth. Ko Hong lowered his head and explained. He said that although the immortal mortal miasma was strange, it was not strong enough to destroy cultivators on its own. The real reason it spread so wildly was because most cultivators in the world had already died in a huge calamity. He said that the path to forming a golden core had only one true Tao, no matter how many methods existed in the world. Because of this, countless cultivators were stuck at the foundation establishment stage and could not advance further. Li Fan looked up at the ancient characters carved into the stone wall. As he stared, he murmured to himself in shock. He wondered if the great calamity of heaven and earth was connected to this truth. A sudden thought struck him. Maybe immortal techniques could not be cultivated by more than one person at the same time. Ko Hong looked at Li Fan and confirmed it. He said that immortal techniques truly could not be cultivated by more than one person. He then explained further. In ancient times, things were different. There were no such restrictions back then. Countless great cultivation sects had opened their gates to everyone, taking in disciples and teaching their arts freely. Cultivators could seek guidance from their masters whenever they faced difficulties in their practice, and learning immortal techniques was far more open than it was now. In the past, disciples could spar with each other and exchange insights freely. Many people practiced the same cultivation methods together, and the whole cultivation world was full of life and energy. But then everything changed. One day, the efficiency of everyone's cultivation suddenly dropped. A cultivator practicing the 9-yang armor scripture felt something strange in his heart. He sensed the exact number of people in the entire cultivation world who were cultivating the same technique as him. As time went on, cultivators made a frightening discovery. The more people who practiced the same method at the same time, the weaker the cultivation efficiency became for everyone using that method. Countless cultivators soon found themselves unable to improve at all. Their cultivation stopped completely. As their lifespans neared their end, the killing intent in their hearts could no longer be suppressed. Chaos broke out everywhere. Masters and disciples, as well as martial brothers and sisters who once trained side by side, suddenly became mortal enemies. A great calamity swept across the entire cultivation world. Anyone who practiced the same cultivation method saw each other as obstacles on their path to the Tao, and every meeting turned into a fight to the death. Even rogue cultivators who tried to hide in deep mountains and secret realms were found. There was no escape. Ko Hong explained the reason. Cultivators practicing the same method could sense each other's location, making it impossible to run or hide. Li Fan asked how people cultivated now, since immortal techniques could no longer be practiced by more than one person. He also wanted to know what the cultivation world had become in the present day. Ku Hong slowly explained the situation. He said that in the current cultivation world, anyone who wished to cultivate had only a few choices. One of those choices was to join the Myriad Immortals Alliance, a loose group formed by many different cultivators. In the Myriad Immortals Alliance, cultivators could earn contribution points. These points could be gained by taking missions, completing tasks, or trading with others. With those points, cultivators could exchange for cultivation methods and different resources inside the alliance. Then he talked about the second choice. He said the second option was to join the Five Elders Council, an organization created by 5 extremely powerful figures whose influence covered the entire cultivation world. He explained that anyone with the talent to cultivate could freely join the Five Elders Council and select a cultivation method. But there was a price. Those who joined had to sign a soul contract and serve the council for a period of time. Li Fan asked why. From the chained man's explanation, it sounded like cultivation methods were not very rare in the current world. Ko Hong smiled bitterly and explained the truth. He said that all the cultivation methods available today were incomplete. They were newly created by the major powers over many years, and the strongest they could reach was only the peak of qi condensation. He explained further. There were fragments for each stage: qi condensation, foundation establishment, and golden core. Each fragment allowed a cultivator to rise only to the peak of that realm. To go any higher and create a Tao foundation, a cultivator had to abandon their old technique and switch to a completely new cultivation method. The same rule applied to every realm above foundation establishment. Li Fan frowned and repeated the idea. If cultivators had to switch to a new method every time they broke through a realm, then all the effort they spent before would be wasted. He felt this was unreasonable. Ko Hong quickly explained the solution. He said that everyone who cultivates must practice a fragment of the supreme primordial true scripture. He told the old man that this scripture was not a cultivation method, but a special secret technique. Its purpose was simple. It allowed a cultivator to disperse their cultivation without suffering heavy losses. A small comparison appeared in his mind. Before learning the scripture, dispersing one's cultivation would cause serious injuries. But after cultivating the scripture, the dispersal became easy and harmless. He said that once a cultivator dispersed their realm, they could switch to a new method, and because of the scripture, they could quickly regain their original level again. Li Fan looked shocked. He said it was unbelievable that such a miraculous method existed, but then he frowned again. He felt that the scripture fragment had appeared at a very convenient time. Only with this fragment could cultivators around the world be willing to constantly switch their cultivation methods. Ko Hong sighed. He said there was nothing anyone could do about it, because a true cultivation method was extremely rare. He then revealed something important. Dao Shunzi had died without ever knowing the real reason he was chased. Ko Hong explained that he didn't run away simply because the stolen method was a core formation method. The real reason was that the technique he took was a genuine, complete method, one that could directly lead someone into the nascent soul realm. Li Fan gripped his staff tightly. His eyes widened as he repeated the words in shock. He muttered to himself, saying nascent soul, a true method, as the weight of the revelation sank in. After that, Ko Hong explained some basic facts about the cultivation world, such as how a cultivator's death could create celestial signs in the sky if their realm was high enough. Once he finished, he went back to the main topic. Ko Hong then shared a rumor he had heard long ago. He said that for thousands of years, mortals from the immortal Forsaken Lands had been secretly entering the cultivation world again. But he admitted that this was only gossip. It was nothing more than random street rumors, with no real proof behind them. Li Fan spoke firmly. He said that rumors always came from somewhere, and sometimes they were the truth. He added that as long as there was even the smallest bit of hope, he would never give up. Ko Hong looked at him tiredly. He muttered in frustration, wondering how an old man who was already so close to death could still be this stubborn and restless. Li Fan made his offer calmly. He said that if the chained man helped him find the path back to the cultivation world, he would set him free and even take him along. He also promised to return everything that belonged to him in Dao Xuanzi. Then Li Fan's expression grew fierce. With burning eyes, he added that this included the nascent soul true method. Ko Hong stared in shock. He raised his voice and asked if the old man was really serious. Li Fan calmly answered that he was. Hearing this, Ko Hong gritted his teeth, his eyes burning with determination. He finally agreed and shouted that if that was the case, he would give everything he had to help. With Ko Hong's help, Li Fan began gathering historical books and records from every corner of the world. He searched through countless writings trying to find any clues about the Great Migration era hidden within ancient fragments. At the same time, he ordered the army to dig up ancient tombs on a massive scale, hoping to uncover any trace or hint that could lead him forward. The people complained, and officials sent reports criticizing him every day, but he ignored them all and suppressed every objection by force. 16 years passed, but Li Fan still found nothing. He stood alone in the dark underground chamber, thinking about how little time he had left. Too many years had gone by since the Great Migration era, and his remaining lifespan was far too short. He sighed as he walked forward. He knew his end was near, yet all his searching had brought him no results. His body had grown extremely weak. It trembled like a small candle shaking in the wind, ready to go out at any moment. Li Fan looked at the storage ring on his finger. Before his life ended, he wanted to check what items were still inside it. Blue energy swirled around his weak hand as he activated the ring. A golden scroll floated out. It was the Thousand Mysteries Jade Cosmos, Golden Chapter, a cultivation method for the nascent soul realm. The scroll showed that the number of cultivators practicing it was 0. Li Fan stared up at it. He sighed softly, thinking about how tragic it was. Even though he possessed such a priceless technique, he was still just a mortal without divine sense. It felt like sitting on a mountain of treasure without the ability to enjoy any of it. Next, a rusted sword appeared. It was Dao Xuan's sword. He remembered Ko Hong's words after a cultivator died. Their foundation establishment wondrous item would lose its power as the cultivator's body and Dao faded. He looked closely at the sword. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of him. A bright blue message announced, "Rechargeable item discovered. Rusted sword Dao Xuan damaged. Proceed with recharge." Li Fan's eyes widened in shock as the glowing option hovered before him.